The political panel all-stars up shortly, whānau, but now this week's extra one-on-one in 10 with Green Party MP Lawrence Xu-Nan. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show, and thank you for being available to the Fourth Estate. Your democracy is grateful.
Kia ora. Thank you so much, Bomber. Thank you so much for having me.
Comrade, can I just start by apologising to you on behalf of all decent Kiwis everywhere? The deplorable, racist manner in which Winston attacked you was beneath the mana of our parliament. You are a conscientious voice in our democracy. You add amazing insight and critique to our democracy. And New Zealand is definitely a better place because you're in it. What does it say to you about how unhinged our politics has become that the foreign minister is starting a fight with China to try and justify his racism against you?
Yeah, I think that the key thing here is what we have is someone who's a product of the New Zealand political system that has allowed someone to get away with something like this over and over and over again. I mean, this is not a new thing. We've seen this for decades, the same kind of politics coming from that one particular person and that one particular party. But I guess the question then is, what is Parliament, what is society willing to do about it? What is governments willing to do about it? Not just currently, but for future governments, to ensure that this sort of thing doesn't happen, to ensure that we are looking at honest politics. I mean, if we're looking at the fact that this sort of conduct would not be acceptable in the workplace, it certainly would not be acceptable in the school environment, it is kind of shocking that we have allowed these sort of behavior. But what has been really heartwarming, and I'm incredibly grateful for this, is the kind of support that we have been getting from across the board. And what it fundamentally also reminds me is that as a core value and principle that New Zealanders are compassionate, are good, and we do care for each other.
New Zealand First are campaigning on removing the right to vote for 700,000 permanent residents while creating a baby bonus only for babies made with pure blood New Zealanders. The PM has acknowledged that Winston's comments were racist, yet he is staying on. Is xenophobia the new political vibe for 2026?
I mean, we've seen that not just here in Aotearoa New Zealand, we've seen that globally. We've seen the divide and conquer tactics. But I think what's also really important here in Aotearoa is how we are all brought together under Te Tiriti o Waitangi. I think that as a foundation document, whakaputanga is absolutely vital, because on one hand, you have political parties that go and tell migrant communities that Māori and Pasifika are lazy. At the same time, they'll go into those communities and say migrants here are taking your jobs, without addressing the fact that everyday New Zealanders are being ripped off by large corporations, the likes of Google and Meta, etc., who do not pay their fair share of tax here in Aotearoa New Zealand. And that's what the Greens is willing to address.
It is not the fault of migrants coming to New Zealand that we haven't built the infrastructure and public services they need while they're here. Why do we have such a terrible legacy of treating migrants so poorly in this country?
I mean, part of that is because, we see in each election that migrants are often used as scapegoats for political football. And partially, if you're looking at those who are on temporary visa types, your student visa, your working visa, they don't get a chance to vote. They don't get a chance to stay in our political system. So this is, again, if we're looking at from the perspective of how we do honest politics and how the New Zealand public should trust politicians, we should be looking at how policies would affect and would be good for all of us, as opposed to, just the ones who are eligible to vote. I think when we start looking at election and politics from the perspective of who's going to vote for me, we actually lose sight of the bigger picture.
Yeah. What does go back to where you came from mean to all those migrant Kiwis living in New Zealand?
I mean, a third of Aotearoa New Zealand were not born in New Zealand. Another third's parents are not born in New Zealand. We do see that, there are a lot of generational migration here in Aotearoa New Zealand. And I think that's really important to go from that perspective. But also, as MPs, what's really wild is, everyone is a citizen and you are rightfully here. I grew up here in Aotearoa. I spent most of my school lives, I've got multiple degrees from the University of Auckland. Where am I supposed to go? I have more connection here in Aotearoa than I do with other countries, in other countries. I'm incredibly proud of my whakapapa, of where my heritage is from. But in terms of my, I guess, circle of reference, it is here in Aotearoa.
Yeah, of course. In 2018, Taika Waititi famously said New Zealand is racist AF. Was he right?
Yeah. I think there are certain voices that has been allowed to be platformed, where when something like this happens, is where you see this outpour of support. So I guess my message to a lot of people here in Aotearoa is, when it is safe for you to do so, continue to call out racism, look after each other, and making sure that we really exemplify the manakitanga that we are so proud of. But we do see aspects of racism, and this is one of the reasons why we need to speak up around things like this. And I mean, an incredibly privileged situation to be able to do so, because as we see before, when New Zealand first went on their anti-India parade, we saw horrifying graffitis outside of a Papatoetoe primary school.
Yeah, we did.
That should not be allowed, because that puts our children at harm. I think none of us want to see our children come to harm. Well, maybe except for ACT.
Finally, comrade, what do you think is at stake this election?
That was at stake at this election is what is essentially our future. Whether it's climate change, whether it's healthy environment, whether it's cost of living, whether it is social cohesion, the ability for us to hold together. So I think this is one of the reasons why, from a Greens perspective, that's why we're looking at things like what does affordable living looks like, what does a healthy nature look like, what does honest politics look like for all of us. And I think this is where having those one-to-one conversations with people has been so incredibly heartwarming throughout this entire period. And I'm just grateful basically every day to be able to be in a position where I get to have that one-on-one conversation with a whole bunch of people with all sorts of interests, coming from all sorts of background, with thoughts of all sorts of experience to be able to share with me.
Thank you, Lawrence, for sharing your insight and oversight this evening. All power to your arm, comrade. Good luck in the election.
Thank you so much, Mama.
Thanks,
Have a good
comrade.
evening.
You too, brother.